computer.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Nicole Feledy from Is This My Story? And today we're going to be talking about how you find your purpose. We're going to look specifically at the Clifton StrengthsFinder strength of connectedness, but we're also going to look at how the different talents come in together. So I've got the wonderful Dena here with us from the UK, and the wonderful Danny Crouch from the Gold Coast in Australia. And they're both going to help. So the three of us are going to explore this talent for you so that you'll get a better understanding of it. So as I said, my name's Nicole Feledy from Is This My Story? And I work as a personal and professional development coach, primarily helping people connect to their path, how they can understand their story. And we use a combination of StrengthsFinder, narrative and mindfulness. So I'm going to throw over to Sarah and so that she can introduce herself.
Hi Nicole, hi Danny, it's nice to be with you today and talking about one of my, I know you shouldn't have favourites, but talking about one of my favourite talents, connectedness, the one that we share as well, so it brings us together. I'm Dena, I run Dena Coaching, and I specifically work with mums like myself whose daughters get labelled as bossy little madams and drama queens. And I help parents to be more confident in nurturing those talents that they see in the early years so that they can help to raise their daughters to be fierce, future female leaders.
Sounds awesome, and certainly something that we really, really need in today's society. And Danny, what about you?
Yeah, g'day. Hi, Nick. Hi, Sarah. Good to see you and talk to you again, as often as we do through our connectedness. I'm Danny Crouch from Choose Your Chapter, where we help you choose the chapter of life you choose to live. And as a maximised connector at 1 and 2, I'm all about helping people connect with their strengths on a massive, massive scale. So regardless of whether it's in sport, in education, or just in business in general, it's about finding what's good in yourself and others and wanting it to become spectacular. So, yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking I don't know how to get rid of my phone so it's not going to make noises. Sorry about that, everybody. Well, at least you know it's live. So Danny has agreed to act as moderator for Sarah and I. So Sarah and I are going to be talking about the talent of connectedness because we've got different other strengths. And so I'm going to throw it back to Danny so that he can explain, just in case Sarah and I missed something or there's something that we haven't said that's clear enough. Dan's going to be able to clarify it for you. So, Danny, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Just to preface, I suppose there may be a few of you out there that don't know what the StrengthsFinder is or know your top 5. So basically the Clifton StrengthsFinder is a profile assessment that you complete and you look to identify and uncover your top 5 talents. So as coaches, Nick, Sarah and I will be discussing certain talent themes. You may or may not have this talent in your top 5, but it's a good idea to learn a little bit about it. And if it is in your top 5, it's an exciting way to learn a little bit more about how you can be a bit more resourceful. So to give you a bit of background on what the talent theme is described as, according to Gallup, who built this tool, people exceptionally talented in the connectedness theme have faith in the links among all things. They believe there are few coincidences and that almost every event has meaning. In other words, everything happens for a reason and there's no such thing as a coincidence. So for those with connectedness, it's a relationship building talent. And we're going to look at the relationships that the three of us have built and how connectedness applies in your everyday life. So there's obviously opportunities to look at talents in a resourceful state and an unresourceful state. So I'll start with you, Sarah, if it's okay. What does connecting to your path mean?
So you mentioned unresourceful state, and up until I unlocked my strengths 4 years ago, I was very much in an unresourceful state, but I didn't know any better at the time until Strengths pointed me in the right direction. So let me explain a little bit more about what that means. I spent my entire life, if I'm honest, my entire life until my late 30s, just bumbling along. And I don't know how well that phrase translates, so let me try and explain it a bit better for you. I had I had an internal feeling, a kind of an internal guide that was just allowing me to move through circumstances, situations, problems, challenges, wonderful experiences. And you said about, I understood that there was a reason for it, but I wasn't taking ownership of that reason or taking any ownership of the direction that I was heading in. So I almost used it as an excuse, if I'm honest, to kind of say, oh, well, this has happened to me and there's a reason for it. I need to understand what that reason is. I need to find out what that reason is. I was never in the driver's seat. I was never setting the course of my path. I was very easily influenced by the direction and the path that I saw other people taking, and would often find myself either following their path or trying to emulate their path in my own. But when I did not understand my connectedness talent and the ability that I have to set my own course of direction through my other talent themes, that was the moment when I realized that I had these 4 other talents that I could really draw upon to set the compass and set the direction for my own path. That was when I can't say I went from unresourceful to resourceful. A lot of the coaching work that I've done with you guys through your storyboarding circles, Nick, and your Habits of Strength program, Danny, have really helped me to make that journey from this misguided path that I was kind of carving out for myself or following other people to please them, to really come in and check in with myself and say, well, who do you want to become, and what does the path to get you there look like?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Yeah, it does indeed, Sarah. It does indeed. So in your line of work, working with a lot of mothers, having connectedness, I'm guessing, allows you to just go with the flow and embrace looking after your kids. How do you address that with mums that don't have connectedness and then compare it to some of the mums that do?
Now, that's a good question. So there's an element of, you'd think that's the case. You would think that the statement that you just made was the case, but there are often times that being a mum, I have realized almost just my talents hit the basement more often than I would care to admit when it comes to parenting, because you're in control of yourself, but you're not in control of the small person that you are dealing with. They have their own wants, their own needs, their own motivations, and that's why for me personally, I'm so passionate about strengths-based and talent spotting in our kids, so that for me, whether I have connectedness or not, if I can begin to understand why my child is doing the thing that they're doing. So behavior is the obvious place I work with parents on. If I can understand why they're behaving the way that they're behaving, I can look at their talents and I can figure out the need that is being triggered. So I can do that a bit more intuitively with my connectedness and belief talents combined. But if I'm working with a parent who doesn't have either of those talents, being able to connect with the need of the child is how we solve that problem. And there we go. There's my restorative talking. Awesome, I told you, awesome. you can't escape the influence of your other 4 talents.
It's great to hear that you can connect where and when you do identify your other 4 talents playing in significance. And obviously, as an experienced coach, there's also your top 10 and top 12. But
yeah,
we want to focus on top 5. So when it comes to connectedness, a good word that comes to mind is segue. So moving from young kids into young adults as teenagers, which is Nick's specialty. Can you define for us what connecting to your path means, please, Nick?
Thank you, Danny. And it's interesting with Sarah talking about how when we're younger and when we're in a raw state, particularly with a talent like connectedness, we might have a tendency to think, well, everything happens for a reason. And certainly a lot of my experience mirrored Sarah's. I had a sense that there was something else out there, but I couldn't always put my finger on it. I always knew that it was important for me to see the big picture. I needed to understand what else was out there. But it wasn't until I actually did the Clifton StrengthsFinder and found out what my talents were that I started to have a language or a dialogue for it. Now I'm an English teacher by trade. So having a language was a really big thing for me. So as I said, I work a lot in the area of story. I work a lot in the area with teenagers. And what I found that by using something like the StrengthsFinder and understanding that my number 2 talent was connectedness, was to actually be able to connect a whole lot of different aspects of my life that then suddenly all fell into place. So often I was a school teacher and thought I wanted to be doing more. I wanted to be reaching more students. I wanted to be doing more, but I didn't know exactly what. And there was a few changes at school. And so essentially what happened, I realised, much the same as Sarah did, that I was not on my most resourceful path. So it was one of those wake-up moments. I think we all have those wake-up moments where you suddenly think, what am I going to do? And so a talent like connectedness, particularly as Sarah was saying, when you connect it with your other talents, you start to realise what you're going to do. So my number 1 talent is actually a talent called strategic. So what strategic does is give a path. Maybe if I go 2 steps back and explain, so remember I'm an English teacher, so I like to work in metaphor. And I like to think of my talents as a foot. So if strategic is the foot, my toes are connectedness. So it is my toes that give balance. My other talents, my learner, my intellection, my input, they're like the bones and tendons. But my foot is the strategic. It is what puts it on the path, and my toes are what give me balance. So when you really come to understand your connectedness talent, you come to see that it's all about providing that big picture view, being able to see the path, or being able to see exactly what it is you want to do. Thanks, Danny. Oh, Danny, I don't think we can hear you. I can't hear Danny. Sarah, can you?
Whilst Danny comes off mute, whilst Danny comes off mute, I just want to add what you talked about there with the language, Nick. I know if we're here today to talk about connecting with our path and finding our purpose. One of the joys of finding StrengthsFinder for me and helping me get on my path and wake up and smell the coffee was the fact that it was such a positive language by which to talk about myself.
Definitely.
So I'd spent all of those years just kind of beating myself up about all of the things that people had told me I was bad at and that I didn't do so well, and just having a really negative view of myself, if I'm honest, not feeling worthy of, even if I set myself on a path, even if I put myself on a course, who was I to achieve any success? Because I had a really negative perception of myself. So I think for the listeners, it's important to recognize that, we live and breathe, and we're so enthusiastic about strengths, but just think about it as the language that we're using. I would never have had the confidence to even boldly put myself on a path because I didn't have that value, and that positive language that enabled me to make sense of that was, literally life-changing. Such transformational stuff.
Definitely.
Awesome. Nice pick up, Mr. Restorative. Picks up that I was on mute. Yes, trying to drown out the sound of the background that was going on. Trying to pay complete attention and be present in the moment and allow you girls to talk about what you talk about. Really cool. So what I'm hearing there is, obviously there's 3 forms of connectedness here. One driven by restorative, which is Sarah. One driven by strategic, which is Nick. And myself, which is driven by maximizer. Now, connectedness being a relationship building talent, we look at how connectedness relates to other talents. So the benefit here is that we've got Sarah with restorative, which is an executing talent. We've got Nick with strategic, which is a strategic thinking talent. And myself as a maximizer is an influencing talent. So we're combining all 4 domains and connecting it through the relationship building talent. So how about I throw this one at you, Sarah? How would you see strategic connectedness playing out differently to restorative connectedness?
Ooh. Okay. So for me, strategic connectedness is going to be more forward-looking than my restorative connectedness. So one of the things I value most about working with Nick is her ability to be literally, and this sounds awful, it sounds a bit cliche, like I'm using her terms, but literally be 2 or 3 steps ahead of me in being able to, for me, being able to figure out, work through my challenges and my problems. So I think the strategic connectedness is much more forward looking, not necessarily seeing the future, but is more looking forward, where my restorative connectedness sees me a bit more dealing with what's going on in the present, what's going on now, and particularly looking for solutions to problems to get over, to move forward.
Awesome. Now, the slight difference there with Sarah in comparison to Nick and I is both Nick and I share connectedness at number 2. Therefore, Sarah has 3 other talents in front of connectedness. So from an executing perspective, Nick, we can also look at Sarah's belief, because belief comes in at number 2. So throwing a strategy out there and put you on the spot, what do you see as restorative and belief coming at connectedness that compares to your strategic path and strategic connectedness?
Oh, so that's a good one. See, I had in my head how I was going to go with restorative and connectedness. Restorative and connectedness, and you've thrown me. So I think, as Sarah was saying, because restorative looks very much at solving the problem, and so it's going to be in the now. And belief has very firm values. So what connectedness is going to do is to be able to pull out and see how those values align or connect to the problem that's in a particular situation. So it's going to connect the values and the problem. It'll make sure that the problem is solved according to values, because it's able to connect them and able to see the big picture of a particular problem. So rather than getting stuck particularly down at a granular level, Sarah, the talent of connectedness with the talent of restorative, would be able to pull back, look at it from a wider perspective, and the belief is just going to colour it to make sure that values are being honoured, I imagine. Would that be right, Sarah?
Yeah, and I really like what you've really like how you've described it, and it just popped something popped into my mind when you were talking about it, and that's how with my connectedness alone, everything happens for a reason. Now that I've got my belief talent in the place that it needs to be, I am able to say, as I move forward on my path, that everything happens with a reason. So hopefully you can feel the difference. If it's happening for a reason, it's not necessarily me controlling it. It's not necessarily me setting the course. But if it's happening with a reason, then as you said, I have that value base, I have that purpose, I've identified who I want to be, who I want to become, and the difference I want to make in the world. And I'm then able to make sure that the things that are happening with a reason. So it's more intentional.
Yeah.
Which I guess that's the executing talking, isn't it?
Yeah. So if it's all right, Dan,
brilliant. And
what I was going to say is that I think, as Sarah was saying, the way when you start to combine talents, which I think is very much a connectedness thing. Connectedness does tend to work very much in terms of a dynamic. One thing I've noticed, and just to pull it back a little bit to connectedness and strategic, connectedness for me, I don't know what it's like for you guys, doesn't honour time. Connectedness is timeless. So past, present and future exist for me simultaneously. So if I was continually in a connectedness theme, when I'm in connectedness, time has no meaning. There is no time. Whereas strategic is time bound. Strategic wants to have the start and it wants to keep progressing through to the finish. So I really rely on my strategic to keep my connectedness moving forward. So instead of just being in a big web, it's actually moving forward. So it's the strategic, which is really what Sarah was saying there before. So the dynamics are so important.
Interestingly enough, though, Nick, if I can respond to that, you really, just through sharing what you shared that with me a couple of weeks ago, that concept of timelessness, and I hadn't thought about connectedness in that way. And it's so important. I know Danny and I talk about this quite a bit as well, just using the connectedness talent to let things be, So as a restorative, I want to solve the problem, and I want to solve it now. And I get unresourceful if I can see the solution, but I can't get to it fast enough. And that's where I can use my connectedness to say, you know what, just let this be for a minute, or for whatever period of time it needs to be. The solution will come. Have trust and faith, and it will come good.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, and depending on where you are in the world, you may have heard an Aussie saying, "She'll be right, mate." And it goes along the lines of connectedness, where more often than not, we'll just let things slide and allow it to come to fruition. Now, just going back to what Sarah said a minute or two ago, with the difference between everything happens for a reason or with a reason. The Clifton StrengthsFinder can also be known as the Clifton Excuse Finder, in the sense of when we look at connectedness, rather than doing something on purpose, allowing whatever it is to be, we can then start to attach, oh, that's why that happened, or that's why that went wrong, or that's why there's a problem. And you start to find a reason to justify what's going wrong in your life. We're talking about focusing on strength and empowering ourselves to be better people. So by using the strength of connectedness, as Sarah says, it's about doing things with a reason, with a purpose, to align with what you're meant to do. So by flavoring this with my number one talent, Maximizer, if you look at the connection between the definition of Maximizer, finding what is good to become great, connectedness is about believing that there is a higher purpose. So for me personally, at the age of 43, I've always thought there is something bigger and better around the corner or in store for me. So if I'm not too careful and I sit back and say, she'll be right, it'll happen one day, it may never happen. So just allowing to sit back and be in a comfort zone may not see me empower myself to be where I want to be. And I try and instill that with friends, coaches, clients, so on and so forth. So where I'd like to ask the two of you is, where do you identify connectedness in a raw or basement state where it could be holding you back from motivating yourself, taking action, inspiring others, getting you to where you want to go? And Nick, I'll start with you. And we'll ask this in two parts, one in your personal relationships and then two in your business life.
Okay. Thank you, Danny. So if I was to think about how connectedness can be raw or in the basement in terms of my personal relationships, it's very similar to the sorts of things we've already talked about, that it can be too, I lose track of time. So it's too big picture. It doesn't think about what's actually happening in the here and now. It floats from one part to another. So what that ends up doing in terms of relationships is that people don't know where I am. People don't know where I stand. People don't know what I'm up to. There's no concept of time. It's almost like being in a dream state. And so my connectedness just floats. And it's a bit like, as I said, like we've already talked about, things will happen for a reason. So I just float. And very similarly in a business situation, my main thing in a business situation is time management. I really, really need that habit of strength or that way to manage my time, because connectedness, as I said, no time management. So that's my big basement in terms of, in terms of business.
Awesome. Now, just to clarify, the intention here when we talk about the StrengthsFinder and focusing on strengths, it's in comparison to what we generally tend to do in society, where we focus on weaknesses or what's broken or what's wrong with us. What we're actually doing here and identifying a raw state or a basement state is what we class as being unresourceful or unproductive within a strength or a talent. So by becoming aware of that and accepting that we will live in these moments in time, it's not about pointing out what's wrong with us or where the flaw is in the talent. It's about identifying it, becoming aware of it like Nick is, and open and honest to say that time management may be an issue for her. But rather than neglecting it, it's facing it head on and looking at how we can overcome that. So I'll ask a similar question with Sarah. How does it play in your business life, and how does it play in your family relationships in an unresourceful state of connectedness?
Okay, so I'm going to flip the question a bit, if I may. So if we think about the point of today's, the point of our talk today was around connecting with our path and with our purpose. And I think I started by pretty much saying, you know, I didn't know what connectedness was, but I just had a feeling that I was destined for something bigger. That sounds a bit crazy to the average person, particularly somebody who doesn't share the connectedness talent.
Yeah.
For people who have things like maybe futuristic, maximizer, perhaps, you know, someone saying, oh, I'm just destined for big things, that may resonate with them or significance, that may resonate with them to a certain extent. But just saying, I'm destined for something great, and then not knowing what that great thing is, not knowing why you're doing it, not knowing how you're going to accomplish it, not having habits in play that are going to take you from where you currently are, whether it's good, bad or indifferent, to that place that you just believe you're destined to be. You don't have any of that. No one's going to believe you. And just both in my business and my personal life, which is why I can't separate the two, Danny, which is why I wanted to sort of flip the question a bit. Until I got that clarity, until I figured it out, what was that thing that you've been yearning for, that you've been feeling like you're destined to do, until I was able to kind of label it isn't the right word. Nick's taught me how to talk about narrative. She's taught me how to talk about my story. As I was able to start explaining that, then I started to it's almost like putting road signs on the path, you know, to say, okay, so here's the big thing, you know, the big thing is out here. But in order to make that happen, you've got to understand why you're doing it. You've got to understand how you're going to do it. You've got to understand what you're going to do. Who are you going to need? All of these things, they then come into play. And I think absolutely agree with what Nick said about the timelessness and being able to, mine's not so much about time management in the way that Nick described it, but I had no sense of urgency because I couldn't articulate what the end goal was, why I was doing it, how I was going to do it, who was going to benefit when I did it. Couldn't describe any of that. So there was no sense of urgency. Where again, thanks to people like Nick and Danny and the programs that I've been able to participate in through their work, I have that clarity now. So with confidence, I can talk about the who, the what, the why, and suddenly there is a sense of, there is a sense of time, but it's not, I'm running the show. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody that doesn't have Connect, but I'm running my own show now as opposed to allowing something else like the universe to run it for me.
It does indeed, Sarah, and I must confess, thank you for bringing you back on track. I'm guilty there of my connectedness playing out there where I could see how what I was saying was connecting. So by talking about the basement and the raw state of connectedness, where I connect that to is some people may believe they've stepped off the path, but for someone with connectedness, you're still actually on the path. It's just you may be clouded in the way you see it. So it's about having that faith and belief in you are doing the right thing, regardless of how it may affect you emotionally, psychologically, and behaviorally. It's about believing in this higher purpose or this bigger thing that's out there. So rather than making the suggestion that if you're in a raw state or in a basement state, you're actually moving away from your path, now that we're aware of being raw or basement, and it's about being in that awareness moment, Sarah, how, once you are aware of that state, how do you flick that switch, or how do you get yourself back into that resourceful state of full purpose and back on the path?
Well, I think I do two things. First and foremost, I use other people to help me get back on the track or get me back on the path. Because I think connectedness is about relationships. It's about people. And I've spent a lot of time investing in relationships that weren't serving me well. And one of the ways that I've been able to I think, mature into the person I am becoming today is about recognizing and being brave enough to say those things aren't serving me, so stop doing them. Instead of the unresourceful state of, well, you must be in this relationship for a reason. The universe is sending you this person for a reason. So I'm able to use the relationships and the trust in the relationships that I have to show my vulnerability, to talk about the things that I'm not proud. I'm not proud of some of the decisions I've made, and some of the ways that my unresourceful connectedness has taken me down certain paths. However, now that I have that, it comes back to that point I made about having clarity. If you've got clarity on why you want to do something, how you're going to make it happen, what's the result when you do it, it gives you the positive energy, and you've got that positive language to be able to explain to people how you're going to make it happen and why you want to do it. You've got that ability to, with confidence, make those what may feel like uncomfortable or difficult decisions, to let certain things go, so that you can free yourself to move back onto the path.
Awesome. Now, just for variety, we'll probably end this here with the last question for Nick, and I'm just going to add a bit of spice in there. If we're looking to people who have either strategic and a partner or a colleague or peer has connectedness, how would you encourage them to partner up and use those two strengths together as a power force in that relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question, Danny. As I said, certainly, look, strategic can be one of those ones that's very difficult to explain because it moves with lightning speed in the head. And so strategic is very much able to see the way to go from point A to point B in the best possible way, and it moves very quickly. So if one partner has strategic, they're going to be able to see big picture and be path. The benefit of having something like connectedness is the trust that connectedness has. Connectedness is able to link in almost energetically or intuitively to what connectedness is, to what strategic is doing. So a partner with connectedness is going to be able to understand a partner with strategic, perhaps a lot better than someone who doesn't have connectedness, because strategic can be very difficult to follow because so much happens in its head. So what connectedness allows a person to do, it's highly, highly intuitive. It just senses things. And so what I'd be encouraging anyone who's out there who's got connectedness is just to be able to find that space and trust it, because it will guide you. As Sarah said, as Danny said, it's not about, so we talk about things happening for a reason, but it's not happening, it's not about an excuse. It's about you will recognize something will happen and you will understand why it happened. And it's just that intuitive knowing, to trust that intuitive knowing. Things are all linked in some way, shape or form, and you will notice it. So with strategic, it's about being able to form a very clear path, dare I say, a very clear understanding of how someone's going to get from point A to point B in the most resourceful way possible. It'll just help put words to it.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Nick. Very, very clear there. Very, very clear. So that pretty much wraps it up for the first episode here, talking about connectedness. What we're going to do is, wherever you are watching this, if you want to comment below, ask any questions to either Nick, Sarah, or myself around connectedness, or perhaps a talent theme that you have that may contrast up against connectedness if you want to learn a little bit more. And looking towards the future, if there's any strength you want us to address, please put it in the suggestion box as well. So you will probably find us through the Confidence Cafe, which is the group that Sarah runs. You'll probably find us as well. So Nick on isthismystory.com and myself on chooseyourchapter.com.au. And you'll probably even find these videos on the Choose Your Chapter YouTube channel. So please, we encourage engagement. That's the whole concept behind the Clifton StrengthsFinder profiling tool, whether it's in business, in relationships with your partner, or even with your kids, no matter how old they are. So I'd like to say thank you very much, Nick, for the invitation here, and Sarah for allowing me to be a part of this. And thank you very much for your answers and how you've enlightened me on my number 2 strength.
Thank you so much, Danny.
Sarah?
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.